This is episode 360 of Jumble Think.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Jumble Think, where we interview dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers all about their journey of turning dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we're going to share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's show is Daphne Maxwell Reid. More about Daphne in a moment. Whether you're a new listener or a longtime fan, if you've never subscribed to Jumble Think, now's the time to do it. Head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts, search for Jumble Think, and click that subscribe button. To make it even easier, if you head on over to jumblethink.com, you'll find links to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and more. So head on over, subscribe to the show, and never miss another episode of Jumble Think. Now let's join today's conversation. Hey there, friends. Welcome to Jumble Think. My name's Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have a great conversation lined up for you today. But before we dive into that, we want to take a moment and thank our friends over at Floxy for sponsoring today's show. Whether you need some amazing graphic design, video editing, or even web design and development, they can help. Best of all, as a listener of Jumble Think, they want to give you 10% off your first month. All you have to do is head on over to Floxy, FLOCKSY.com/JumbleThink, and start getting that design, that editing, and the website of your dreams. It is so good to be back in the studio for working on today's episode. I'm here editing in our basement, in our little studio that we set up for Jumble Think. And I have been on a journey the last couple months. I've been in California helping out with the wildfires. The conversation from today's episode is actually recorded in California while I was out helping out with the wildfires in California. So it's good to be home. It's good to be back with family, but it was amazing to be out back in California, spending some time with friends and working on that project out there. Our guest today, though, is Daphne Maxwell Reid. She is an actress, an author, photographer, a designer, a really talented person who has broken the ground for years in various spaces. She was the first Black woman on the cover of Glamour magazine back in 1969. You may have seen her act in TV shows like Hill Street Blues, The Love Boat, The A-Team, and most likely you know her as Aunt Vivian Banks on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. She's authored several books. They're really cool. Some of them are about doors. She's taken pictures of doors from around the world in France and Belgium and in Cuba and beyond, and told the stories of those journeys. She also has a cookbook out called Grace, Soul, and Motherwit. Really talented actor, really talented in the world of fashion. She's doing design and making some masks with really cool designs. We're going to talk about all of this and much more in today's conversation. Of course, we're going to be covering the brand new BET Christmas special she has coming out called The Business of Christmas. And probably for you listening, even more exciting, we're going to be talking about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air special on HBO Max 30 years later. It is an unscripted reunion special coming out in a couple weeks. You're going to want to listen, or you're going to want to check that out on HBO. You're going to want to watch that Christmas special on BET. Well, let's join this conversation. It is a phenomenal conversation with Daphne Maxwell Reid. Good morning, Daphne. How are you?
I am very well. How are you?
I'm amazing. How cool is it to talk to Aunt Viv?
Hey, everybody gets to talk to Aunt Viv if they want.
Oh, wow. You know, when I have a guest on, there's a lot that I start out with knowing about them typically. They're typically someone I've seen on something or read about or learned about because of an achievement that they've had. Maybe it's a book, maybe it's some kind of craft that they've done, maybe, they make something. But what always amazes me time and time again is the depth of the person that I never knew from the surface of my experience with them. Of course, we all know you from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but there's so much depth to beyond actor for you. There's photographer, there is activist, there is forerunner, and just so much more. I want to start the conversation off with something that you said in an interview, and I found this fascinating, and I wanted to dive into it. You said actors have to wait to be chosen. And I thought that was fascinating. Talk to us a little bit about what that means.
It means a lot of times the profession that you go into, you have some control over.
Yeah.
And as an actor, you really don't have control over your life. You have to wait to be chosen by a project, by a director, by a producer. Mm-hmm. So you spend your time preparing to be chosen.
Yeah.
And in that time, you've got to make that time valuable. Mm-hmm. And you've got to make that time purposeful. So I always encourage people who want to be actors to also have something that they love to do with which they can earn a living while they're waiting to be chosen.
Yeah. Do you feel like that story is true for you?
No, I have not put acting as the top of my list of things that I have to do.
Yeah.
It's been a career of opportunity and just special surprises. It's been a wonderful journey, but I fill my time with other things that I do that bring me joy. And that includes manifesting the gifts that God gave me at birth. Well, I'm very talented in the sewing and designing and photography. And I have lots of ways to earn a keep and to express myself. So while I'm waiting for my opportunity to be an actress, I'm very busy.
You know, one of the things I heard you say was that you need to honor your gifts. And I thought that was really profound because I think a lot of people, they're ashamed of their gifts. They're ashamed of the things that make them unique and special. And yet it's when we embrace those things that we find the joy of life. You seem, from every conversation I've seen, from every moment, whether it's a moment of acting or you're promoting a book or whatever, you seem so joy-filled. And I think in our world, that is a place that many of us should find. What is your secret to joy?
I think my secret would be to accept the present as the fullness of life. To accept where I am as where I am. And that's all that there is where I am. We're not promised a future. The past you can't do anything about, so don't dwell on it.
Yeah.
And I just remain present. And in that, I see all the things that make the day glorious.
Love that.
And every opportunity that I get, I try to learn something, be helpful, be purposeful, and find a way to be happy doing it.
Love that. You have a bunch of really great projects coming out this year, and we need some fun projects to experience right now. It has been the year that just keeps on giving us grief, I guess. Yeah. Time and time again, whether it was you or other cast members, everyone said there would never be a reunion special of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But here we are this year, 30 years later. You have an unscripted reunion special on HBO Max coming out. How did that come to be a reality?
I think that a lot of people thought that we should do a reboot, like they did with
like Full House.
All the shows that are supposedly rebooting from their original cast coming into the present. We knew that you couldn't reboot the Fresh Prince because our lives are so different, that the world is so different than it was when we were doing that show. And you can't recapture the magic that those people had in that context.
Yeah.
So don't try to reboot it.
Yeah.
But definitely trying to look back and celebrate what we created 30 years ago was just a fantastic idea, and it was a great, great session.
So when they say unscripted, what does that mean? What does that look like?
That's not a TV show like a sitcom.
Okay.
It's not, we're coming back together to say these words that are written for us.
Okay.
We came back to have a reunion, and it was so well orchestrated, and it was so well produced that I think the audience is going to get as much of a charge out of it as each and every one of us did as we reunited as a group.
So does this mean that you're coming back as yourselves and having a conversation 30 years later? Does it mean that you're coming back as your characters? What does that look like?
We are never not our characters, according to the public. But we are coming back as the people that we are and reuniting on the set of Fresh Prince living room.
Wow.
And we were sharing stories and sharing memories and sharing what we're doing now and sharing special guests that Will had prepared to show up that day. It was just a lovely day.
Yeah. Fortunately, one of the key cast members, James Avery's passed, and so that changes that dynamic of family. Time and time again in conversations, you mentioned how this is a family. It's not just a group of actors doing a job, but you became much, much more. You also, in conversations, have mentioned how none of you thought Fresh Prince was a generational milestone. And yet it's become something that in my generation, I'm 39, we look back to as part of our childhood, part of the canon of our lives. And you look at like Dick Van Dyke's show, you look at other shows throughout history that for whatever, Mary Tyler Moore show, you look at just all of these different shows that seem to appear on Nick at Night at some point or something like that. You look at these shows and a lot of them weren't something that people thought was special at the time. Star Trek is a great example of that, where in its moment, in the cultural relevant time in which it was produced and created for, it had a different life than it did once it went on to syndication. Why do you think The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air has been such a cultural milestone and touch point for not just one generation, but multiple generations now? Why do you think it continues to have a life that impacts so many?
I think Fresh Prince was created with the very basic concept of a fish out of water, and it embodied so many different viewpoints from each member of the set family. Mm. And we dealt with issues that are universal. So what applied back then in relationships, in dealing with problems, has now applied to our third generation of viewers who can identify with a young, hip, somebody who steps into a totally new environment and has to deal.
Yeah.
And it's not unusual that a lot of the stories that we presented are things that actually happen in families, generation after generation after generation. I mean, fathers leave, fathers return, fathers leave. Mm-hmm. It's just a stigma that happens in our community, and we confronted that and dealt with dealing with that, which kind of encompassed knowing that your family is not just your blood relatives, which is what we show to Will. Yeah. It's not just from whom you were born. Your family are the people who love you.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I think that more than ever, the significance of family has been highlighted by COVID and the chaos going on in our world at so many different levels, so many questions, so many fears, that unity of community is something that's becoming more significant. I'm curious, you've been a forerunner in the African American community in so many different ways, whether it was in college at Northwestern, Northwestern, in a change of culture there. You helped be a forerunner in that, being the first Black woman on the cover of Glamour, being the forerunner there. You know, you look at the Cosby Show, which was right before Fresh Prince. Fresh Prince is kind of that next generation of shows dealing with a Black family. Do you feel like there was a lot of the Black culture that was represented in that show? Do you feel like that you had to navigate this plurality of white versus Black and being acceptable to a larger audience? There wasn't, you know, BET didn't really exist at that time. There wasn't a voice for Black culture, or culture other than a very monolithic culture represented on TV. Do you feel like you were able to show and represent that voice of the culture that built your community, built your voice as a Black woman?
We had the unique opportunity to make sure that the scripts and the shows reflected the honesty of our culture. We would sit in our script readings on Monday, and after reading the script, and they were written by very fine writers,
Yeah.
but most of them were white.
Yeah.
And there are nuances in the Black community
Yeah.
that we wanted to make sure were identified and dealt with honestly.
Yeah.
So we had the unique opportunity to speak up and say if the script called for young Tatiana to talk back to James and sass her father, we said, excuse me, no, in our community, that little girl wouldn't have teeth.
You just didn't do that, right?
No, you rewrite that part. That's not going to fly.
Yeah.
So we tried to be very honest, and it was great that we had the opportunity to do that. And that was a rare opportunity. The Cosby Show, of course, was a brand new opportunity. And since Bill had control of the content and the concept of that show, you got to see Black people that you had never seen before on television, but they were very familiar to our neighborhood. You got to see successful Black people, which were not depicted by people who didn't understand the power of the images that they were representing as they were creating their television shows. I had an interview and we were talking about Julia. I mean, yes, it was wonderful that Diane Carroll was represented and had her own show, but they never took her out of her nurse's uniform.
Yeah.
I mean, she was a human being. Let's see more breadth of the person that she was.
Yeah.
So having the opportunity to have input in depicting our characters is a joy. I had the pleasure of working with my husband on Frank's Place.
Yeah, Tim Reed.
That was a show in New Orleans,
Yeah.
and it had just a myriad of characters represented there to show all sorts of Black people, the Black people that we grew up with that were not represented on television because nobody knew they were there.
Yeah.
But us. And
Yeah.
when we have the power to use our strength to show and tell our own stories, then you see more of what the Black culture is actually about.
So during that time, you had Sister Sister, you had the TGIF family of shows. There was a very, Urkel and all of that going on, Steve Urkel. What do you think shifted that opened up those opportunities to have that conversation, to show a group of people who hadn't gotten to share their voice? What shifted to allow you and others to have that opportunity at that point?
It's hard to pinpoint what shifted, but the world continues to shift.
Yes.
The world shifted from the 60s to the 70s in how people express their desires. In the 70s and 80s, there was an opening of tentative, well, let's just expose a little bit of them. No, that one's too Black. No, that one's not Black enough. There was a balancing act going on about what was going to be acceptable to the general population. And I lived through all of that. I lived on a day where in Chicago, I was doing commercials. I auditioned for a white company for a floor cleaning or something. and I auditioned for a black ad agency for McDonald's.
Yeah.
I didn't get either one because the black agency said I wasn't black enough, and the white agency said I was black. So, I mean, I lived through that kind of sorting out of opportunities and sorting out of the guilt that was recognized when the mirror was held up and said, this just isn't right.
Yeah.
And having people of good conscience who went about fixing that, opening up the opportunities, there were some. And we can still use more who can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you got to do it in feature films. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not just for black actors.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's lots of them. And there's lots of stories to tell, and you've got to tell it from our point of view.
Yeah.
So there was that.
We're going to take a break right here, but when we return, we're going to continue the conversation, learn more about some exciting projects that Daphne's working on, and do our wonderful rapid fire questions. We'll be right back. Hey there, it's Mike. And as a small business owner, I understand that it can be really hard to hire an employee or a big agency to manage your graphic design, web development, and video needs. But there's hope. Our friends over at Floxy are here to help you. They offer unlimited projects by a vetted creative team for a flat monthly rate. Video editing, graphic design, writing, web design, and more. And they're constantly adding new categories. Best of all, as a listener of Jumblethink, they're going to give you 10% off your first month. And they're going to include a 14-day money-back guarantee. If you are ready for new business cards, a new logo, a new website, they're there to help you. So head on over to floxy.com/jumblethink. That's floxy.com/jumblethink to get 10% off your first month and start getting the design and development you need for your projects. Now let's continue the conversation. I want to come back to our culture and race in a little bit, but I want to circle back to some projects that you're working on right now. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, 30 years later, is coming out, and I'm excited to see that. That comes out when?
It comes out Thanksgiving weekend. And they haven't given us a special date yet, so I can't tell you exactly when it is. HBO Max is keeping that secret.
That's something to look forward to. So much has been taken away, whether it's the specials that we usually experience at Thanksgiving or travel, or so many things have been taken away. So to be able to revisit other times and to relive those moments, that's a powerful, powerful thing.
It'll be a family reunion when you're supposed to be having family reunions.
I also know that you are working or have worked on a new Christmas special, which I love Christmas time. I think once we hit around the Northeast fall, I'm from the Northeast, and, you hit Thanksgiving. Well, we hit Halloween and then Thanksgiving through Christmas and New Year's. That's my favorite time of the year. That's our family's favorite time of the year. And one of the things we always look forward to, of course, is Hallmark season and all the Christmas specials there and on Lifetime and elsewhere. You have a special new show coming out, The Business of Christmas, which originally was going to be on Netflix, but now it's going to be on BET. Tell us about that project.
That was a lovely project that was written by a Black woman and produced by a Black woman. And it's a story of a family needing to regather to recapture some of the depth of their relationships while their toy store that they've been owning and running for years is having some difficulty.
Okay.
And the parents don't want to drag the kids into helping them with this problem, but knowing that they have nowhere else to turn, they really want to gather as a family
Yeah.
and figure out what's going to happen with the store.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely story, and it's got 3 fabulous kids who have very different ways of life, and a mom and dad who are supposedly empty nesters, but knowing that the nest should never stay empty.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any idea of the release on that on BET or anything like that?
It's going to be on December the 1st.
Oh.
Right after Thanksgiving.
Well, that's beautiful. I love that as an entrepreneur myself. That story is getting told more and more. You and your husband are both very entrepreneurial. You started your own studio. You, of course, I think a lot of people don't realize how entrepreneurial the world of acting actually is. I mean, you're constantly looking for that next project, that next job. And then beyond that, for you, you have Daphne Style, which is really fun fashion that you just don't see a lot of that style of fashion. And it's beautiful. And you make it, which is...
I make each piece, yes. I call it my wearable art.
Yes. Yeah. So you're doing that. You've written several books, the most recent one being a cookbook, Grace, Soul, and Motherwit. You have this series of books, which is really fascinating. And I'm going to tell this story real quick. When I was in elementary school, and I've never told this story to anyone, I remember we had a teacher come into the art class, and they were writing. I can see the room. I can see exactly how it was laid out. And in this specific class, another teacher came in and said, "Hey, I've worked on this project. I want to show you a different aspect of art." And it was photography. From what I understand, you got your passion for photography from your father.
Yes, he was an amateur photographer, but he took pictures all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I learned later in my life that he had been one of the photographers during World War II.
Wow.
So I have a collection of his photos from World War II overseas and building airstrips and riding around with some of the commanders. He had a very interesting life that he didn't talk about when I was growing up.
Yeah.
It was like later in his life that I was finding out all these things about him. But he also attended some sort of, I think, Allen University, which is a historically Black college.
Yeah.
I think he attended for a year or two, and he studied photography.
Oh, wow.
And I guess he loved it too. He's always had a camera we have pictures from when I'm just born. So I have a collection of me that goes on and on and on because my father always took pictures.
Yeah.
And our family is always represented in these pictures. And I shared these pictures in my cookbook, but I also got a bug that I've never lost.
Yeah.
I am never and have never been since I left home in New York 50 years ago. I have never been without a camera or a sewing machine.
Wow.
These two tools have been my solace and my survival for many years. I've made my own wardrobe since I was 9 years old, and I've taken pictures all over the world because I've had the opportunity to travel all over the world.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to bring back was what my mind captured as an important detail of life.
Yeah.
And those are my photographs.
Yeah.
They're of details of doors, of floral arrangements on a building, of what God has done to the facade of a house. I have a background in interior design and architecture, which I studied at Northwestern. So I'm always focusing on the details.
Yeah.
And as I created all of these things, it dawned on me that I have a purpose in telling stories to people to encourage them to dream, to not miss the details in their journey from A to B, and to focus on these details because that's what makes the journey rich.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to miss the opportunity of living your life fully. So that's what my photographs have tried to engender in their viewing.
So the part of the story that I've never told, which is going to be bringing this back to you, is that this specific teacher who came in and talked about photography had published a book of doors in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And so for me, when I saw that you've written several books, I think is it four? Yeah. From France and Belgium to all over Cuba and beyond, you've taken these pictures of doors, and I just found that fascinating because it reminded me of that memory from my childhood.
Yeah, I sparked a lot of, I take pictures of doors too. I get a lot of that from the people who but I don't do anything with them. You've done something with them. Yeah, I encourage you to share.
Yeah. So much of what you've done has been a forerunner for others, blazing a trail that others can follow. As a person, you were Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered, 1968? Is that right?
Okay.
And you were going into Northwestern right out of that.
Oh, no, I was already in Northwestern.
Okay. You were in Northwestern.
I went to Northwestern in 66.
Okay. So you were in that. You were a part of that shift of a very small minority in that and helped change that culture. You did a sit-in there, which is something I want to bring that to now. As a mother of the movement, of the civil rights movement that has blazed new trails in acting and in entrepreneurship and so many different spaces, what would you talk to a person in my generation or after our generation about this touchstone moment that we're in right now with Black Lives Matter, with people really saying, I have a voice, my voice matters? As a mother in this movement, somebody who has been there, who has paid sacrifices to bring hope and freedom and opportunity to others, what would be the message you would want them to hear today?
Well, I went to the March on Washington in 1963.
Okay.
My mother was an activist.
Yes.
My mother was a organizer. She was a flag waver, a button waver. She based her commitment to humanity on her Christian beliefs.
Yeah.
And she taught me the responsibility of representing people who don't have a voice and not being afraid to speak up.
Yeah.
So I never had a fear of making change.
Yeah.
I got to Northwestern as one of 36 Black students in the whole school. But that didn't diminish who I was. It meant it was an opportunity for them to learn from me.
Yeah.
Because I thought that their racism was just ignorance. They had never been exposed. And I contend that that is still the case, that the racism that is screaming with permission now, I think that has been allowed to happen, but it is something that is taught. This is not something natural.
Yeah.
If you are interacting with people of all races, there is no racism.
Yeah.
You realize that human beings are human beings.
Right.
When we get the opportunity to tell our own stories and to make sure that our history of building America is told, it's an informative thing. And if you don't want to hear it and remain racist, that's up to you.
Yeah.
But it is up to us to make sure that our children know that they should not be diminished by what they are called.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with the human beings that they are.
Yeah.
And that this journey has happened for 400 years in America.
Yeah.
This is nothing new. It's just your turn
Yeah.
to speak up and find civility and humanity and the original thought of Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah. As a person of faith, I pastored for years, and that's something that's significant to me. Faith and this movement need to go hand in hand. The church needs to, I mean, that was the call of Christ, to take care of the broken, the outcast, the marginalized. And yet I think so many of our churches, as a person that's inside the church, so often we miss that, and we forget that. For our big programs or our big buildings, we sometimes forget those things.
Right. And religion should not be politicized.
Yeah.
Religion is religion, and politics should stay politics. And to see the two of them walking hand in hand and depending on each other is very disturbing. Yeah. It turns me off of religion. I'm still a faithful Christian, but religion is disturbing me because of what it has bastardized into.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's a difference between religion and faith.
Correct.
And authenticity of what the text teaches us.
Yes.
One final question about this space. I asked LeVar Burton this, and that was, as a guy who obviously isn't black, who is a guy, there's a lot of the world that I don't experience or see because of the culture that I grew up in. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just my presupposition. It's my experience, just like you have your experience. What would you want me to know that I might not know about what's going on in this conversation of race and reformation of our relationships with each other? What would you want me to know? What would be your hope that my responsibility would be in this conversation so that we can bring change?
Your responsibility, I believe, is to educate yourself and your community.
Yeah.
And to open up their eyes to the world and know that your community is not singular. It's not separated from everybody else. You are a person in this world.
Yeah.
And there are so many different kinds of people in this world. It behooves you to try and meet a few and exchange a conversation, a thought, share with people outside of your community. So you'll see that humanity is humanity, not secularized into little boxes.
Yeah, love that. We'll be right back with rapid fire questions. There is a lot going on here at Jumblethink, and we want to make sure you stay in the loop of everything that's happening. But how do you do it? Head on over to jumblethink.com, where you can sign up for our email newsletter. Or better yet, if you want to join the conversation with other dreamers and idea makers just like you, head on over to Facebook and join our Facebook group. To make that even easier, if you head on over to jumblethink.com/group, take you right to that Facebook group where you can join for free. So join into the conversation, stay up to date with Jumblethink, and start dreaming and turning those dreams into reality. Now let's jump into rapid fire questions.
Levez seulement le bras pour mettre l'aiguille sur le disque. Mettez le contact, reposez votre bras et attendez. Restez calme pendant un moment.
We always do rapid fire questions to wrap up the conversation. So let's do a couple of those real quick. The first question is, how do you find purpose in what you do?
I find purpose in the response that I get from doing something joyful that helps somebody.
Yeah. What is one challenge you're currently working to overcome?
Time. Being in two places at the same time.
What's the next big goal that you have?
I don't usually set big goals. I set the goal for tomorrow. Mm-hmm. I don't do the big scheduled dream. I'm a person who lives in the moment and by opportunity. And if no opportunity shows up, I create some.
As a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Many, many things.
And it sounds like you've gotten to do many of those things.
I wanted to be happy and I wanted to be fulfilled.
What is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
Start by putting your foot forward. Mm-hmm. Start by getting out of your chair. Start by looking something up. That's all it takes. Start is starting.
Yeah.
And not being afraid to start by predicting what you think the future will hold.
Yeah. What is one change you'd like to see in the world?
Civility.
Yes. What do you want your legacy to be?
I want to be known as somebody who gave of herself and who was honest and loving.
What is one trend you are currently excited about?
A trend? I don't much go for trends. Masks. Okay. I've been making masks.
Yes, and beautiful masks.
I've been wearing them for a long time, so I make masks, and it's exciting.
I will say this about your masks. Most masks are very boring or very, I hate to say on the nose, but, they are very obvious. I saw a guy with a Broncos thing. You know what people love and all that by their mask. You make beautiful masks.
Thank you. I use my creativity to create joy when somebody walks down the street.
If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
Laying on a beach.
Nice. What's one thing you wish you would have known when you first started out?
That failure is not an option.
Wow. That's powerful. Our final rapid fire question. What is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
Oh, I want to live to see my grandchildren's children.
Wow. Love that. As we wrap up, we always like to leave our guests have the final thought. What is that final thought you want to leave us with today?
Something that my husband taught me many, many years ago. To all my fellow thespians, don't let the successes go to your head and don't let the failures go to your heart.
Daphne, it's been an honor to have you on the show. You've touched so many people in this world through your acting, through much more than your acting, the things that you've stood for and the things that you've believed and how you've been passionate to communicate those messages. I'm so excited about the 30 years later of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I'm excited about the Business of Christmas on Netflix.
Thanks.
I can't wait to actually check out that Grace Soul and Motherwit. That sounds like such a fun book too.
It is. You'll learn a lot and you'll hear lots of stories. There are wonderful stories in there that cover 40 years of life. And you can get all of that stuff at DaphneMaxwellReid.com.
And that link will be in the episode notes. So all you have to do is click it wherever you're listening. We make it easy. Just go there.
Excellent.
And check that out. Daphne, thanks so much.
Have a wonderful day, a great holiday season, and I hope you get to spend some with your family.
Thank you so much. Once again, I want to thank Daphne for taking time out and being on the show with us today. Make sure to go check out what she is doing, whether it's her books, whether it's her fashion, or the new shows she's working on, the new projects. Go check them out. The links are in the episode notes. I also want to thank our friends over at Floxy for sponsoring today's show. On your next project, whether it's graphic design, video editing, or even that new website, they can help. Best of all, because you are a listener of Jumble Think, they want to give you 10% off your first month. All you have to do is head on over to Floxy, FLOCKSY.com/JumbleThink, and get that project started. I also want to thank you for tuning in to today's show. There were so many important conversations, whether it was about faith or acting, our childhood, race, so much more. We talked about amazing things, and I hope that something from this conversation has challenged you, encouraged you, and entertained you along the way. Now, here's the deal. Daphne has done so many incredible things, but she has taken the step, the leap, the movement to make those things happen. I want to challenge you today. What are the things that you are holding back? What are the things you are not willing to step forward into? and maybe make that step today. It doesn't have to be a big leap. You don't know where that step's going to take, but take the first small step and begin that journey of turning those dreams into reality. Thanks again for tuning in. Now it's your turn to get out there, to dream big, and to change the world around you.
Étirez-vous doucement, mais complètement. En avant, en arrière, sur les côtés. Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.